let's begin our first panel. I would like to introduce two people, and as I say your name, if you wouldn't mind just saying hi. Ramsey Alwin, Director of Thought Leadership, Financial Resilience at AARP. Hi, Ramsey.
Hi there. Good morning.
Good to see you. And Michael Nicin, Executive Director of the National Institute on Aging. Hi, Michael.
Muted myself. Here I am.
Oh,
hi, everyone.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. So these two people and these two organizations are so significant, so accomplished. In the case of AARP, this is an organization that was founded in 1958 by Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, and I was struck by that in an era totally dominated by men. AARP is such a large and important organization, was started by a woman, and by the way, she is in the Women's History Month. She's a Women's History Month honoree. And let's listen to the founding principles of AARP from back in 1958: to promote independence, dignity, and purpose for older persons, to enhance the quality of life for older persons, to encourage older people to serve, not to be served. In the case of Michael Nicin, your organization was founded much more recently, and also with a very important mandate. Founded in 2016 by Ryerson University, the National Institute on Aging is dedicated to enhancing successful aging across the life course. It is unique in contemplating aging from all perspectives, including financial, physical, psychological, and social wellness. I'd love it if each of you would tell us a bit about yourself and the organization, and then I have a question for you. Ramsey, would you mind going first, please?
Well, thanks so much for this opportunity. It's a real pleasure to be on with everyone. AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization. So Ethel had a vision 60 years ago in terms of helping her fellow retirees. And even in those early days, she was looking to the global stage to understand that we could learn from promising practices from around the globe. There was an international affairs division upon AARP's inception. As we've built out, we have a membership today of over 38 million individuals, 50 and older, and we continue to be focused on ensuring the health and economic security for all and their ability to realize whatever future they would like. So it's a pleasure at AARP to lead our financial resilience efforts on behalf of the Global Thought Leadership Team, where we're looking very closely at how longevity is interfacing with the future of work, as well as financial resilience over life course. And with COVID-19, this is an even more important topic than ever before. People want and continue to need to work, and we're looking at different ways that we can leverage future of work conversations to ensure the 4 to 5 generation workforce is age diverse and age inclusive. It's a pleasure to be able to lead that charge, because I want to make sure we're changing the systems for myself as I age, as well as for my daughters. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. I have a widowed mother that lives with us. We are truly a multi-generational household. And when I think about what I want the world to look like, I want it to be improved systems and policies for me, for my community, for my family.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. Michael Nicin.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And I have a lot of respect for the AARP. I'm not sure that there's many global leaders in terms of organizations as effectively and thoroughly doing the work that you're doing. So happy to be on a panel with you and everyone else as well. The National Institute on Aging, obviously much more nascent, but we were created a few years ago to specifically respond to the multiple complex challenges that come with an aging population. And that's specifically not as a sort of scare tactic or a worst case scenarioing, but really sort of thinking as our population gets older, as we have catch up to do from decades of sort of coasting by on assumptions that used to be valid, 30, 40 years ago, what could we do as a center to help governments, large systems, industry, and also Canadians themselves to really harness the opportunities that come with a fundamental shift in demographics? In the early days, when the baby boomers first started turning 65, it was about 10 years ago now. A lot of reports about the tidal wave, the Zoomer wave, whatever you want to call it, about the older people coming on board, and it was scare tactics. But I think what's been lost in all of that, and we seem to be regaining it slowly, and COVID hopefully will give us a tipping point, is that we need to do much better by our older folks. We need systems that respond to the emerging needs of older Canadians. And we need to keep looking forward and really sort of combating what I think is a substantial problem exposed by COVID, is deep systemic ageism towards older people, and a sort of fear of growing old that I think we need to counter and really embrace more as we do this collectively.
So ageism is a significant issue. There seem to be other sources of inertia as well. Let's first ask Ramsey, and where does the inertia come from, Ramsey?
So ageism really is the last acceptable ism. According to AARP's research, we've seen 1 in 4 workers 45 and older are subject to negative comments from coworkers and from supervisors. 3 in 5 people 45 and older have experienced ageism in the workplace in some way, shape, or form. It seems that it's this ism that we don't self-identify with. We were not born older. We were not born recognizing and embracing our aging self. And so we can be our own worst enemy. We contribute to the negative stereotypes. There's some work by Becca Levy at Yale University that looks at these negative stereotypes. And the bottom line is the evidence demonstrates it's not just a bad idea to be perpetuating these negative stereotypes, but they're actually bad for our health. When we embrace and we own these negative isms, we are actually taking life and years of life off of our own. So there's a real case to be made to disrupt some of these negative stereotypes. And one of the ways to go about that is just to begin to open up conversations and recognize that ageism along the spectrum. She's too young to lead the organization. He's too old to learn the new technology is unacceptable. And we're only discriminating against our future self when we buy into ageist stereotypes.
Thank you, Michael. Your thoughts on moving?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think the bizarre thing is, we have all kinds of bigotry and isms in society, and none of them are acceptable. But the difference with ageism, as we just learned, is that we're going to be in the shoes of the people that we're criticizing or afraid of or sidelining now at some point, right? This is our future self, and it's entirely bizarre. And, when I'm talking to media or doing talks like this, I get a lot of questions about intergenerational questions, young versus old. Should we care about the old people? Do they cost too much? And the only thing that ever occurs to me is that we're talking about ourselves at a future state or in a past state, but we're also talking about our families. These connections ripple throughout society. And so it's an artificial barrier that I think its time has come to be torn down. And what I'm really hoping is what we're experiencing here in Canada and certainly across the rest of the world is the unequal distribution of COVID's worst consequences on the older population. I think it's making us realize that we are woven into a fabric together, right? Here in Canada, we have about, very tragically, close to 6,000 older people who died during COVID. The vast majority of deaths are older people, but when you add in all the families, the support networks, the caregivers, friends and family, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who now have a direct line into the consequences of COVID on older people. And so I'm hoping that this is a turning of the tide where we realize we're not solitudes alone in this, that we're all connected, and we're going to be older someday with any luck.
And I would love to continue this conversation. We are going to have an after session after the end of our formal session, and maybe we can continue this there. To Michael Nicin and Ramsey Alwin, thank you so much for these great thoughts to get us going. And with that, Mebs Rantula, over to you. And we have other distinguished guests who are going to join us to reflect further on this wonderful keynote and the questions from Chip Conley. And those two guests are Jim Emerman, Vice President and National Director, Encore Fellowships at encore.org. Gosh, Jim, I guess perhaps you won't be attending that board meeting, or you'll have to slip away too. Plus Patrick Thomson, Program Manager, Center for Aging Better in the UK. Gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind just saying hi so that you're picked up on screen and people can find you. And if you can, are you able to unmute?
I am. I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Yes. Well, welcome everybody. So glad to be here.
Terrific. And Patrick, are you unmuted? Do you need help?
I am, hopefully. Yes. Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here, dialing in from the UK.
Terrific. And thank you so much for joining us from the UK. So in a minute, of course, I do want to hear from lots from both of you about your observations about Chip's remarks. But why don't we start with just a little bit about your two illustrious organizations and fascinating organizations. We've heard a pinch about Encore. So if we could start with the Center for Aging Better. Patrick, just a little bit about yourself and the Center for Aging Better.
Sure, yes. Thank you for having me. So Centre for Aging Better was set up about 5 years ago. We're based in the UK and we're what's called a What Works network. So we look at the evidence about what works around a whole range of different policy areas. We lead on focusing on the aging population and what that means for society, for businesses, for people who provide services. I used to do a similar kind of job for the UK government about 10 years ago. But actually we realized that whereas there we were working on a very short-term time horizon, we were needing a new policy fresh every few weeks or so. Here actually we've got a 10-year lifespan to really look at and dig down into the evidence. We're running pilots, we're working an awful lot with employers to find out and look at the evidence about what works, because this is a whole new life stage for many people. And the fantastic thing is many of us are living and working for longer, but we don't always have good models for how to do that. So learning from things like the Modern Elder Academy and from Encore as well. We have lots to learn from here as well.
Terrific, thank you. Jim Emerman.
Well, I think, Chip said a little bit about us. Encore's been around now for over 20 years. It began really as an intergenerational program, recognizing that our society needed people who could be mentors, engaged with younger people to help them succeed. It really began essentially to answer the question of how can we help younger generations achieve all that's possible in the face of obstacles that particularly poor or minority children face in the United States, and where can we bring the resources to them? And older adults were in a way a naturally recurring resource for people if they were able and willing to devote their life experience to supporting younger people. And we went through a stage in which we looked at what older people could do. For a long time, I ran a program called the Purpose Prize, in which we identified literally 1,000 older adults who had started or accelerated nonprofits in their work, bringing their life experience to that process. Encore does many different things. Right now, we're looking at questions of loneliness and isolation and how social engagement, both by older adults and by younger people, can really solve many of the problems that our society is facing. And, as was mentioned, I worked on a particular piece of that work, the Encore Fellows Program, which is bringing older adults into nonprofits, often from a corporate career, where they work with younger people to solve our society's biggest problems and bring their life experience to the solution of those challenges.
Wonderful, thank you. So with those two powerful perspectives, I'm sure that you noted that there were things in Chip's remarks that struck you, given the depth of your experience with these issues. Patrick, can we start with you? Something that particularly struck you about Chip's remarks?
Yes, I mean, all fantastic. And I would agree with almost everything he's saying there. And some of the, the turns of phrases he's got there are spot on. I mean, picking out some of them. So what he was saying there, particularly about what people need to do in terms of looking for a sense of purpose and community through work and then on into retirement, that absolutely rings true with us in the UK and I think around the world as well. We've done a lot of polling and survey with particularly retired people, and we've asked people, what it is that they most miss about work. And interestingly, the number one answer that people gave was, I don't miss anything at all. So there is still such a thing as a good retirement. But if you've got choice and control about how and when you do that, but really interesting after that, people were saying they miss the social connections, and they miss the meaning and the purpose of it, and the fulfillment and identity that people get from work. Interestingly, much more above the financial aspects as well. And once you've got a base level of income, actually it's all those other things that work provides you that are really important. And people do often start to lose that if they have a cliff edge retirement. So I think all these concepts about how you can have a second stage career, a bridging career, do something different in your mid and later life is becoming more important now than ever. And just one other thing I picked up there was about, particularly midlife has a bad rep, and I think the language used around it is very poor. And as Chip says there, the 3 life stages, it's definitely the poorest cousin of the 3. But the idea of having a midlife crisis, if you look at the origins of the word crisis from the Greek, it has 2 meanings. Definitely one which is a time of intense difficulty or danger, but the second meaning is all about a time when a difficult or important decision must be made. And I think actually in midlife now, that's as important as ever. And if you think of actually, we're going through a crisis around the world right now, and actually it's the second definition about having important decisions to make and being able to make them correctly becomes really important. So I think the more informed we can be about those things in our work and in retirement, so much the better.
Thank you. Jim, your vantage point.
Well, I was really struck by the discussion, and conversation that Chip was having with us about mutual mentorship, and particularly intergenerational mentorship between young and old. This is, something that, of course, goes back, millennia in a way. The relationship of older people to younger people, and how that is so key to the development of leadership, but also making sure that we're bringing younger generations into a place in which they can flourish and survive. And I think right now, there's persists quite a significant division between older adults and younger, in the way that our society is framed, and many of our institutions are framed. And it's an important struggle to overcome that. I think what Chip has been doing, in the corporate sector, and now in his role on the board of Encore, and what Encore has stood for so long, is really the connection between generations to overcome the division between generations. That's incredibly important. And one of the things that really struck me about, when I think about, the society that we live in, how it's evolved, that this is particularly a problem that exists in a distinct part of our society, but not throughout. It strikes me that, particularly in communities of color, the relationship between younger and older is much more seamless. Of course, it starts with families, and families see this often as, an essential part of a family, that the older members of the family are there to mentor and support and bring along the younger members of the family so that they can be successful as well. But I think as a society as a whole, we've often lost this, part of an incredibly important part of what holds us together. And I've seen, especially in, communities of color, immigrant communities, Native communities, within the United States and around the world, that this divide is really, artificial, and often, it's very much a part of how older adults see their role in relationship to the younger people in their communities. And it's something that we really need to return to. And I think there's tremendous satisfaction in that. I'll just stop with that.
First steps. It's wonderful to hear about these strong programs. where are the places that you think the first progress will be made? What can people here with us today, what can people do in order to be seeing progress in their own world? Patrick, would you mind starting?
Sure. We see it a lot, well, both from individuals and from employers as well. So one of the things Chip said there, and I really like the phrase about we need a midlife pit stop, a kind of a time to be able to repot yourself and put yourself somewhere else. At the moment, people don't have that enough. We've worked with a number of employers here in the UK about looking at ideas around having a midlife MOT, we call it. So in the UK, the MOT is your kind of annual check-in for your car, and it's just a time to look at things around your health, your career, your financial planning as well. Because often people don't get anything in terms of careers advice or support after the age of about 18. And I think it's true in a lot of places around the world. So we do need those things, and they do play big dividends. So employers get very good returns on that in terms of the investment in their staff, the retention of their staff as well. And then absolutely for the individual, they get some fantastic outcomes from that, and they are able to rethink what it is they might need from their working life, whether it's a new form of training, an opportunity to work more flexibly or differently, because we do really see in this period that opportunities for progression and training do fall off a cliff. So it's hugely important that we continue to invest in ourselves, and often the employer can be a support there, but also other kind of mutual forms of support from other individuals as well.
Jim?
I think, following up on that, I think that, what we see often is that, the transition isn't necessarily seamless, particularly between work and retirement. And frequently people leave, work with a great deal of uncertainty about what they want to do, or an idea that, relaxation, recreation, travel is, sort of the ideal. And I think for some people, in fact, it is, but many of them, take a first year or two to figure this out. And in the process, realize that there's still, objectives in their life that they want to accomplish. And things that need to be done where they think they can make a contribution. And, more and more, I think we're seeing, a desire that isn't always realized, but very strong among people to figure out, like, what can they do with the experience that they've accumulated to make their lives and the communities that they live in, and, often the world, a better place. And we need more, ways for people to easily make that transition if that's what they want to do. There's a huge amount that people can contribute. The program that I work on, Encore Fellows program, it's relatively small. It's it's becoming more nationally available, but it's only one way. And that's if people want to use their experience to solve a big problem in their community, find ways for them to join and contribute to the nonprofit, social sector that's, operating in those areas, and make them welcome. It's not always easy. And, many of the problems that Chip's identified that exist in the world of work, exist in the nonprofit sector as well. But I think it's an opportunity that our society can't really afford to give up on. We need the talent of everyone to solve so many big problems. I mean, this is exemplified right now with COVID, but it's very obvious beforehand too, that, our society has so many problems, so many inequities, and we need the talent of everybody who's willing to, lean in, and put their shoulder to the wheel to solve this. And we need to make sure that older adults with their experience are welcome too.
Jim, thank you so much. And we're coming to the end of the hour, so we will need to wrap up. So to both Patrick Thomson of the Center for Aging Better and Jim Emerman of Encore.org, we're very grateful to you for these thoughts.